Luca Nation. Let's hope today is the first episode where you get to see this smiling face for the full, 30 minutes, 20 minutes that we're doing the Scouts episode.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking NBA Finals, all things Giannis. I'm not even going to talk about the Suns because Giannis is a monster. Just kidding. Conrad, do you have any topics that you want to discuss for today's episode of Scouts? Any movement, anything in the NBA market outside of the finals, or should we just jump right in? And I want to hear your take on what's going to happen in these last 4 games.
I'm mostly thinking finals. Everything that we're hearing right now and everything that's really going on in the NBA besides outside of the finals, it's all rumors, right? This team could draft this player. This could be a potential head coaching decision. This trade could go down. This trade could go down. Where's this person going to go in free agency? All rumors. No actual movement yet. And, we can talk about rumors and stuff like that. However, I think we should just save that until after the finals. And I think today is going to be, a relatively short episode in comparison. And we're just going to sit down. We can talk about, these finals teams because now we've actually gotten a look at them, in these past 3 games. And we can kind of dictate how we think that the finals are going to go.
So was it a rumor that Nigeria beat Team USA? Was that a rumor?
That was not a rumor. Beat them in an exhibition match, 90-87. I don't know exactly what happened there. Granted, it's an exhibition match. It's not the actual Olympics yet. But and some of it's understandable. You're playing by FIBA rules. There's a lot of guys here that haven't played in the Olympics before, so they're just learning, goaltending rules change, dribbling rules change, and all that sort of stuff. So maybe there's a little bit of an adjustment period. Regardless, I love America. I love Team USA. I think it would be kind of fun though to see the US lose in the Olympics because I always do root for the underdog. So
wow.
At least specifically for basketball because I love these NBA players, but it would be cool to see I don't know, Luka Doncic come in there and just absolutely crush him or something like that. Slovenia just makes it all the way and wins gold medal or something like that.
You're quite the patriot, Conrad. You're quite the patriot.
Maybe not. I guess if I want Team USA to lose this upcoming Olympics, we'll see.
So I said I talked about this on Friday on our daily episode with Cage. I said, guys, don't overreact and don't be so short-sighted. First, don't overreact. 2-0 to the Suns is not the end of the series. This is going to be a long series. This isn't going to be a Suns and 4 type of series. I expect this to go 7 games, and I said the Bucks are going to win. I said it for these reasons. So this whole Suns team, which is kind of impressive, they built through the draft. You don't see that happening that often, but they built through the draft. Cam Johnson, poster. By the way, I didn't know Cam Johnson could dunk like that.
That was a beautiful dunk. I mean, granted, PJ probably shouldn't have tried to take a charge on that one, but that was just, whoo, that was a nice dunk. I love that.
That was a charge, by the way, if you look at the replay. Well, kind of was a charge. He had his feet set, but I'm glad that the refs let him get posterized. But anyway, Cam Johnson, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, and Devin Booker, these are all guys that have got drafted in the last 5 seasons. So they've built through the draft. That's amazing. But you got to remember, they're a young team. And a young team that travels and is on the road, that's a tough environment to play. I was surprised when the Suns came out and had, I think it was like a 28 or 33-point quarter, shot lights out in the first half, but then they faded. Now it's 2-1. Giannis had back-to-back 40-point games. Maybe the most dominant player we've seen down low since Shaq or LeBron. That's up to you guys. What's your take on this series, Conrad? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? How are you analyzing all of what's going on?
I said back when we first predicted not who's going to win the finals, but who out of these 2 teams, who do we think is going to win it and how many games? I said 5 games if Giannis is out for game 1 or for longer, and 6 if he's in, and I'm still sticking by that. I expect them to win in 6 games, the Phoenix Suns. I do agree with your point though. That's an excellent point that especially right now, the age does play a little bit of a factor. I don't think it's quite as big of a factor as some people make it out to be. However, in general, younger players are going to be a bit more affected, in my opinion, by the bright lights and stuff like that, by the amount of pressure that they're now facing than some of these veterans that have been in the league for however long, right? Because how do I put this? They've had pressure on them before, right? And that's not to say that young players haven't, because coming in if they're in the most of the time, they got drafted into the NBA. A lot of these guys are, undrafted free agents, most of them, right? Like DeAndre Ayton went number 1 overall. Devin Booker was number 13, I believe, right? Giannis was number 13 or 15 or something like that. A lot of these guys have had expectations at some point in their NBA careers, during the early parts of their careers. And if they weren't, of course, living up to par, or meeting those standards, then they were facing a lot of pressure in the media and by coaches and stuff like that. They've been under more pressures as veterans, even if it isn't necessarily pressure in the playoffs or pressure in the finals. It is still stress, it is still pressure, and you learn a bit on how to play through that, and that gives you a bit of an advantage in the NBA Finals, which, once again, I don't think it's a crazy advantage because none of these players have really won a championship or been in the finals before, but it's just a slight advantage. Now, I also do agree that the home court advantage is especially important because this series is so even, in my opinion. These teams are very, very even. Not both sides of the ball. I will say that the Milwaukee Bucks are a much better defensive team, in my opinion, but at the same time, I also think that the Phoenix Suns are a much better offensive team, especially when it comes to versatility for both of those sides of the ball.
Yep.
But it's a game of nitpicking. Home court advantage will help them win this game. If this player has a slight injury, then they may win this game, right? It's the smallest changes that could dictate who wins this series and who doesn't, right? And so home court advantage does play a huge factor in that. Now, something I do want to say, and this is the biggest X factor in my opinion, is the top 3 players on both teams. For the Bucks, we have Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Drew Holiday. For the Suns, you have Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, and Devin Booker. The supporting casts, the benches for both of these teams, everybody besides those 3 players, in my opinion, have actually done very well, playing their roles and doing what is needed throughout this entire series. It has been Chris Middleton, it has been DeAndre Ayton, it has been Drew Holiday, it has been Giannis Antetokounmpo, although not really him. But it has been these top 3 guys that have really been the ultimate factors that really kind of are the turning point of the game. If Chris Middleton is actually shooting an efficient game like he did in game 3, or semi-efficient game like he did in game 3, and Giannis drops 40 and Drew Holiday comes in here and he drops 15 and 9 or something like that, you've got a very good front 3 doing exactly what you need them to do. And then, of course, you have the supporting cast doing exactly what they do pretty much every single night. Whereas with the Phoenix Suns, yesterday, nobody really stepped it up for them. They did well, right, but nobody really came out there and was like, I'm going to take over this game. I'm going to get us a bucket when we need it. I'm going to hit the open guy with an easy look or something like that. It was just kind of, I don't know for sure who's open. I'm not sure how we're going to beat this Milwaukee Bucks team right now. I don't know what to do. And it was a bit of a sloppy game on their part, right? So ultimately, in my opinion, it just kind of comes down to those top 3 guys. Who's going to step it up when it's most needed? Who's going to take the lead? Who's going to take the reins? Who's going to take charge and ultimately lead their team to the promised land and win an NBA Finals? That's my opinion.
I agree. I don't think age matters as much as experience does, right? Exactly. Experience. Like when you're playing through and you're going through the finals for the first time, you could do that at 18, you could do that at 30. It's new. You have way more media there. You have to do more press. Your whole routine is different than it usually is. And these guys are creatures of habit. So when your routine changes, by default, your performance will change. And on the road with more media, with more attention, getting, your family wants to fly in and get seats and things like that. We take that stuff for granted. It's not a big deal, but it is, and it matters. So that was one thing. The second thing, why I think this series is going to be so even, is depending on the night, the best player on the court is going to change. Yeah. When you compare that to, let's just use last year's finals, LeBron and AD were the best players every night. That didn't mean the Heat didn't have a chance. They could still find ways to win. But the best players, both of them, were on the Heat. Were on the Lakers. This year, I personally think Giannis is the best player in the NBA, but that's not accepted, and he still has a ton of weaknesses. Whereas one night Giannis could be the best player, the next night Chris Paul could be the best player, the next night Chris Middleton could be the best player, and the next night Devin Booker, right? Yep. And when you have something like that, it's parity, right? It's parity. So I think because of that, it's going to be a 7-game series. Lastly, the bench. I think Coach Bud is he's been very fortunate because he's outmanned and outmatched when it comes to guards. Outside of the starting lineup and Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton, his first substitution, he has to bring in Jeff Teague, right? Like he has to bring in Brent Forbes. You could bring in Pat Connaughton. You could bring in Pat Connaughton, but I think Pat Connaughton plays like a small forward role more. He doesn't guard the point guard position. You've seen Jeff Teague and Brent Forbes get first halftime. Jeff Teague's been subbed into the first quarter of every single game. Do you have any thoughts on that? To me, I want to blame Coach Butt, but then I'm like, at the same time, he doesn't have anyone else to bring in. So how much fault can I put on him?
Exactly. He really. I don't know how. I don't know exactly how to explain this because I'm not an NBA coach, right? Like my opinion here, it's not going to be something that should be taken as this is it. He's 100% right. He knows he's a genius. He knows exactly what he's talking about. I'm not an NBA coach. It just depends on. I think what he has to do is kind of get an idea of how he can divvy up minutes as best as possible, right? I think that Brent Forbes honestly should be the first guy off of the bench at the guard position, providing you some great 3-point shooting, some potential off-ball movement and stuff like that. Whereas Jeff Teague is just honestly had a really bad year all around. Defensively isn't very good. He's not getting buckets in a very efficient manner, at least not at a high volume either. He isn't an exceptional playmaker. He's just had a bit of a rough season, rough few seasons actually. He's been playing like this for a while. I think that if he can somehow have Bryn Forbes in as much as possible as a guard off the bench, along with one of the starters, you might have a better chance. The issue is executing on that plan. Because then you also have to think about, okay, so if we slide someone down to the 2 that normally plays the 3, we need someone to come in and, fulfill that position at the 3. Now, who does that leave? Does that leave Pat Connaughton? Does that leave PJ Tucker? Does that leave Giannis Antetokounmpo? Who's tired? Who's not? Who's played the most minutes? Who's not? Who's most injury prone or at the highest injury risk? Who's not? There's so many factors that play into it, that play into being a great NBA head coach that I personally have never been through, that I personally can't speak on from experience. This is just an idea. So that would be like the ideal situation. But actually being able to execute on that ideal situation in a game time situation, it's extremely difficult to do because things change all the time. Whether you don't get a substitution for 5 minutes. Let's say that teams continue to keep the ball in court, right? Nobody fouls each other. There's no stoppage of the clock that gives you an opportunity to sub a player in. All of a sudden, let's say Drew Holiday's been in there for 5 more minutes longer than you wanted him to be, and your entire plan is in the toilet, right? There's a lot of things that you can't predict in an NBA game as a head coach that you just have to make decisions on the fly about. And unfortunately, when you don't have enough depth at the guard position like we're talking about right now, that's going to make it a bit of a tough situation for Coach Budenholzer. I can't blame him for that. You are 100% right there. As much as it sucks to say, you might have to give Jeff Teague minutes just for the fact that other guys need rest, even if he's not being the most productive player on the NBA court.
Absolutely. I mean, I said it when we did our episode, I think it was last Monday. In this last series, they didn't need Dante DiVincenzo. This series, they need Dante. And there's just a little bit of guard depth when at the same time, the Phoenix Suns have a ton of guard depth. And we've talked about that.
Yep.
Quick episode, 13 minutes. Let's wrap with something fun. So we were doing a Coffee with KG episode yesterday. And a fan asked, boom or bust? And he gave us 5 different players. Boom or bust for the upcoming season. Tyler Hero, Ben Simmons, Jaren Jackson Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., RJ Barrett. Take those one by one. Boom or bust next year.
So it's just like, will they exceed expectations next year versus will they not? Okay.
Correct.
Tyler Hero, he's the first one. I don't think it's really either one. I would say more towards the bust because I don't think he's going to blow up. I don't think he's going to exceed expectations massively or anything like that. I think he's just going to be a subpar player, an excellent role player, excellent sixth man, a solid starting PG or shooting guard, wherever they decide to play him next season. I think that he's just going to kind of fulfill a bit of a role. He's not going to burst into a star, in my opinion, especially if they do land a big-time free agent or if they manage to re-sign Victor Oladipo. I think he's going to have a much less opportunity because the team is going to be more committed on winning now than trying to help him improve and progress this season. So I think that he'll honestly kind of just do the same thing that he did this year, maybe a little bit more efficient as far as scoring numbers go. Maybe he becomes a little bit of a better playmaker. I think he'll improve in certain aspects of the game, but I don't think it's going to be by a crazy amount where you're like, holy crap, he's the guy. He's the future of this team. He's a franchise cornerstone or anything like that. So I'll say neither, but if I had to go one way, it would be bust, because that's how he's going to be framed by most people, would be bust, because he didn't, take a massive leap. Ben Simmons, depends, because he could easily get traded. He probably will get traded. I would be very surprised if he's not. And depending on where he goes, maybe he actually does see a boom year, right? Maybe the right head coach decides to help instill some aggressiveness in him, and that ultimately changes his play style. Maybe he goes to a team with lots of 3-point shooting and off-ball movement, very little other guys in the paint, and he has a lot of room to attack the basket or run pick and pops or pick and rolls and other really good situations for a guy like him that can't shoot the ball to be in. So he's a bit hard for me to dictate. I don't have expectations for Ben Simmons. I've never really thought he was not that good of a player. He's an excellent player. He's a great player, especially compared to a guy like me. But I've always thought he was a bit overrated, or a lot overrated. And I'm going to continue to say it. I'm going to say bust, unfortunately. It's all about the mentality right now, and his mentality is not there, and I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to fix, because he has zero confidence offensively. And honestly, it almost looks like it's starting to affect him defensively as well, because he's just really starting to feel the heat from other players, coaches, media, all of the above. It's just not a good situation for him to be in. Then you said Jaren Jackson Jr., R.J. Barrett, and who else?
Kevin Porter Jr.
Kevin Porter Jr. This is interesting. Jaren Jackson Jr., I think he's easily going to be a boom. The issue is just staying healthy for him, right? He's always had nagging injuries here or there, but whenever he's healthy, he plays very well, and I still expect that to be the same way here. Very versatile defender. I think he supposedly grew like an inch or two, so maybe that helps him a little bit. Relatively agile and relatively fast for a guy his size and a guy at his position. He spaces the floor very well, scores well from the three and from inside. He's a solid mid-range scorer, although he doesn't really have the bag, so to say, to create a shot for himself at an elite level from the mid-range, at least in my opinion. But he does a very good job of being an excellent second option next to Ja Morant. And honestly, statistically, you never know. Next season, he may be averaging more points than Ja Morant. I really wouldn't be surprised, depending on how often he gets the ball, how many touches he gets. I'm 100% going with boom for him. The issue is just staying healthy, honestly. I never expect anything less from him. And then we have R.J. Barrett and Kevin Porter Jr. I'll go with R.J. Barrett first. It does kind of depend on, obviously, what moves they make in the offseason, right? Does Julius Randle get an extension? Does he stay here? They manage to land someone else in free agency? Do they make a trade to move up in the draft and have someone take RJ's position? I'm kind of leaning towards the Tyler Hero route here, where it's going to be neither. But I don't think that there's Tyler Hero's expectations were set way too high immediately. His confidence was his biggest benefactor that helped him hit some clutch shots, have some very good performances, and look fearless as a rookie. RJ Barrett didn't really have the same thing. He was an average rookie. Didn't really exceed expectations or anything like that. So I'm going to say neither, because I'm not expecting a crazy ton of improvement from him, or at least if not really given the opportunity, because like they could extend Julius Randle, and of course he's still the second option in the same situation. Then we won't see much improvement from him. I'm going to go with neither boom and nor bust, and that won't matter no matter what. He's not even going to be painted as a boom or a bust. He'll be almost not forgotten about, but he just won't be as much in the media's spotlight, so to say, no matter what next season. Unless, of course, he has a really big boom year, right? Then Kevin Porter Jr. This is a very, very interesting one. Heavily depends on the draft. If they go with Jalen Green, then that obviously means that they don't trust Kevin Porter Jr. as a primary ball handler / primary scoring option. If they decide to go with Evan Mobley and try to get, that Twin Towers look with him and Christian Wood in Houston, then that gives Kevin Porter Jr. a lot of time. So here's what I'll say. If they draft Jalen Green, not necessarily bust, because he's had some really good performances, but I don't think anybody's looking at Kevin Porter Jr. and saying he's the future, the face of this team, right? I think people are saying he can be an excellent second option, excellent third option, but nobody's really saying he's the guy. So it'll be a slight bust, but nothing crazy. However, if they do go with Evan Mobley, I wouldn't be surprised to see a huge boom. All of a sudden, he's got two big men that he can give the ball to, get his assist numbers up, because they're looking to use him as a point guard. Two guys that he can run the pick and roll with. He's an excellent 3-level scorer. His efficiency needs to get better, but he's got the bag to create shots from all 3 levels. And I think that he can do a good job next season if his efficiency improves. I'm gonna go with Boom if they do manage to draft Evan Mobley, though. If they draft anybody else, I have no idea what's going on in Houston. I don't know what the plan is, and I don't know what to call it, but that's my opinion. Yeah, that was a good way to end it. I like that. It was fun.
You like that? I agree with you, man. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. has the most potential of that group. I think RJ is going to just consistently improve year over year over year. You're never going to see a huge improvement, but you're just going to see incremental improvement. Kevin Porter Jr., X factor. You don't know what you're going to get with him. Tyler Hero, to me, is going to underperform. He doesn't have the physical tools, I think, to be a real star in the NBA. Plus, I think I've said this a few times, the celebrity, the fame got to his head a little bit, and I think he got a little bit more concerned with that than improving. And Ben Simmons, to me, guys, I think he's just mentally broken. There's no other way to put it. I want to say, like, Ben Simmons has the most upside if he could learn how to shoot. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say about someone. If they could learn how to shoot, right? It's like this guy could be the best quarterback in the NFL if he could learn how to throw. It's like, that's a big leap. So
it's really sad to say, because the thing is, Simmons, we've seen Simmons score. We've seen footage where he has taken jump shots, where he's created shots for himself. It's all the mental game. It is all the mental game from him. From the very beginning, it was never a fact of him not being efficient, right? It wasn't like he was averaging 10% from 3 or 20% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. He just wouldn't shoot the ball. From the very beginning, it has been all about his confidence. And they didn't tackle that they didn't tackle that issue from day one, and it has continued to spread like a bit of a virus of sorts, and it's just completely crumbling his confidence right now.
you hit that on the head. So I'll give you a comparison. When you're a new sales rep in sales, so just step away from basketball. We're going to go to sales. Okay, a lot of people get a job out of college, out of high school, and they learn how to sell. It's labor, and there's this concept of just picking up the phone and making calls. Okay, because when you're a new sales rep, you're smiling. I think you know what I'm saying. You don't know if you could close deals, but what you do know, and what you can control is picking up the phone and making calls. And you have a manager, right? Every week you report how many calls have you made this week. You know, Andrew, manager Andrew, this week I made 300 calls. Last week I made 200 calls. Okay, and you track that, right? You're like 200, 300, it's going to make it 330, 350. Every week his performance is improving. Every week his input, is improving. When you see that and you see someone trending up, you know that the results are going to follow. Versus the reverse. You see that this person, they started off making a lot of calls, and now they're making 10 calls a day, 5 calls a day. You go up to them and say, what's going on, man? It's like, I'm not feeling, it's not working. My confidence is low. Well, your confidence is low because you're not putting in the effort. And I don't know how you change someone like that. That's on their end. You can't make someone want it more than they want it for themselves. And that's a scenario here. And oftentimes, and I was that person that I'm describing, failure and embarrassment is sometimes what pushes you over the edge and says, man, I'm not that special. I'm just another person. And if I want to be great, I need to work like everybody else. Unfortunately, Ben Simmons, or fortunately, unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, he's a guy who hasn't had a lot of failure in his life. And when you don't have a lot of failure, you begin to think you're special. Think about it. LSU, first round draft pick, tons of money, dated Kendall Jenner. The guy was a star before he ever even stepped on the court to play. And that could get to your head. It's hard. It's a lot of fame, and it's unearned fame. Yep. So when the iron hits the road and there's friction, he doesn't have the habits or the foundation to fall back on and be like, no, I got this. I'm going to go. I'm going to work on my game. I'm going to close everything out. And my confidence will come through my work ethic. He hasn't developed that. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't think it is fixable.
I guess we'll find out, right? I don't think it is either, but neither one of us are like NBA doctors or psychologists of sorts. We don't work with NBA players, so who knows?
Hey. I'm a psychologist.
Okay. We'll need to see your degree, I guess, on the next episode of Scouts, Andrew. But thank you guys
I'll
so
bring
much
it.
for
I'll bring
listening.
it.
Hopefully by next episode we have a winner of the NBA Finals. We can talk a little bit about that, and maybe we'll get some off-season talk as well. Maybe we'll start covering some of the NBA draft as well. Start going over some prospects and stuff like that. But thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next episode of Scouts. See you guys next week.